Did you see any items on the list today that actually stuck out to you as ideas that just probably have to be successful?
Well, I think it was really interesting because out of I think there was they said 93 items that had come through so far. Some of them were things that were quite obvious. Some were things that are impossible to do. Some of them are things that we hadn't thought of, and there's some new ideas. Some are things we thought of and hadn't really pursued. But now that these ideas are on the table in the public eye, it allows us to have conversation and allow us to evaluate these things as a whole body, as opposed to saying, it's not something I want to do, so I'm not going to put it on the table.
Okay. And how about it seemed like there was a large number of items that discussed reductions in pay or eliminations of spots in the administration and city officials and employees. Um, and we know that there's already been big reductions in spending in those areas. What is your answer to that?
Well, I think a lot of these are, some of these you can clearly see that they came from employees in those specific departments, or maybe they were used to work in that department and they transferred, but there's inside information about things that were happening in the department that are saying, the city really ought to address this issue. Well, I even had one employee tell me, look, Mayor, I never want to be the one to introduce this because, I would have to tell my boss that I think I can do something he doesn't want to do. So they were able to submit something, and now it's on the table, and now we get to have that conversation about whether it should be done or not. The nice part is over half of these items seem to be extremely legitimate. A quarter of them are probably things that it can't be done, or you can tell just by the line on it that it's really not possible, or it's not legal, or it's not something or it's something we've already done, but they didn't know. And then you got a quarter of them that ideas that we really just don't know. We're going to have to kind of explore and see, is this legitimate? Can we do it? How much will it really save? And is this, something we should consider? So it's kind of interesting. Today's event was an unfiltered list of items that people brought to us. And that to me is the beautiful part about this process, is because we didn't go through and say, yeah, that's no good, that's no good. Here's 10 ideas that we like out of this list we got. We gave everybody every idea that came out. So, thank you, Chris.
And how about how feasible is it? I know a lot of the ideas are good. I was listening in on them. But how feasible is it to get some of these done or have them well on their way by July?
Well, the interesting part about it is, as I mentioned to the other reporters, is we don't have to do any of these. If our budget does not get decertified, we have the means to get through this year. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that if we've got some good ideas that can help save us money or generate revenue, that we're not going to do them. Because, Mike, in fact, I know there's 2 or 3 items on there that we've already started, or items that we're in the works on that somebody else mentioned that we are already doing. But the point is if it allows us to save, 10,000 or 100,000 or $500,000, those are things we'll do anyway. It's when you get to the ones that are going to be what I would call a little bit more painful, when you're talking about personnel, and you're talking about wages, and you're talking about elected officials, and you're talking about the public and tax dollars and things like that. Those are the things that become a little bit more challenging, and those are things that we're just not going to do unless we're absolutely forced to have to make those type of tough decisions. So there's some of these things on here are going to be much easier. Some things are going to be a little bit harder, and some things that are going to be impossible. And there's going to be some things that, no matter how bad things get, nobody's going to want to touch. And so that's the process here, is it allows us to evaluate. And as I mentioned, there's going to be an issue that the courts are going to say, no way, that's off the table, and the rest of the room might say, well, maybe not. And then the unions say, no way, that ain't going to happen, no way whatsoever. And then the rest of the room says, well, maybe we could. And there's going to be things that council says, it ain't happening, no way, ain't going to happen. And yet it ends up on the list because, when they look at the alternatives, it may be less bad than something else. The reality here is we just don't know how bad this is going to get. This allows us to prepare for the worst case scenario. And if we think we might have to cut, $3 or $4 million, and it comes out that we only have to cut $1 million, we might be able to find $1 million with the good ideas in here that people can all agree on. And so that's kind of the neat part about this is until we really know what the financial pressure is going to be on us, it's really difficult to determine what really is going to happen. But there's a lot of sacred cows on this list that nobody want to be the one to put on the table that are now on the table. And so when push comes to shove, there's going to be some of these sacred cows that are out there that are going to be at jeopardy of becoming beef stew.